Really interesting and cool thing we are doing today on We Turned Out Okay, partly because we are combining with the Prism Behavior podcast, which is very, very exciting. And I am here for both the We Turned Out Okay podcast and for the OKCon Virtual Summit. To record with Dr. Heather Maguire, who is a behavioral specialist for children, and I'm so excited to bring her onto the show. Heather, this is something we've been trying to collaborate on for
Yes.
literally months. You were actually, as I'm just remembering this, I was emailing you from the hospital a month or so ago when my
Yeah.
oldest was getting, he needed surgery. So I was like, we're
Yeah.
supposed to have, we're supposed to have this podcast recording and
Yeah.
everything. So just a quick update there. He is well. He is happy. He's
Good.
back back into his life. I know we had talked, Heather, about kind of giving an update as to where we are. So I will save mine for after you get a chance to say hello. But everybody, please welcome Dr. Heather Maguire. So glad to have you on the show and in the summit, Heather.
Yes, so glad to be here. And how amazing is it for us to collaborate for the summit, for our podcast, all of that. So I'm Heather Maguire. My podcast is Prism Parenting. And basically, so I'm what's called a board certified behavior analyst. Not very many people know what BCBAs are, but what we do is we help parents who have significant behavioral challenges with their kids. And, I've had a lot of time working in the schools and directly with parents. I've spent most of my time working with parents of kids diagnosed with autism. But the really cool thing about what I do is everything that we talk about that I talk about with parents of kids diagnosed with autism applies in some way to parents of, let's say, typically developing kids as well, which is basically why I started Prism Behavior. So my website is prismbehavior.com, PRISM behavior, not prison behavior. I always have to enunciate. And the basic idea is that, for the average parent out there, it's really hard to find resources that are evidence-based. So that's what I'm committed to. From a personal standpoint, I am married to my husband, Nate. We've been married for 15 years. And actually, we were supposed to go on this amazing 15-year wedding anniversary trip, but it looks like with everything going on in the world, it's going to be postponed. We were joking around 16 is the new 15. That's okay.
Yep.
And I have 2 kids. So my son, Landon, is 9, and my daughter, Addie, is 6. So Landon is in the 3rd grade, and Addie is in 1st grade. And who knows, they're in the room next. I'm in my home office, so if they come bursting in, oh well, we'll roll with it. But yeah, I'm mom of 2, and so they've been home just to kind of give, Karen and I thought it would be great to give kind of an update of where we're at. So I'm a professor, so the Prism is kind of my side hustle, if you will. So my full-time gig is I'm a professor. And so I teach in person and online. I teach graduate students. I am a school psychologist as well. So I teach behavior analyst classes, school counseling, and school psychology classes to grad students. And I teach in person and online, but it so happens this term I was teaching online already.
Oh, wow.
So that's fortunate because
Cool.
my classes were already online. So I've had to still kind of adapt. Like the students were supposed to be doing assignments where they're working live with students, and we're kind of moving to a more of a case study format. So we're adapting. And then, my husband already works from home as well. He does travel a fair amount, but luckily he hasn't traveled in the past few weeks. And so he's working from home, and our kids, technically, their instruction at home starts tomorrow, technically, because what our district did was move spring break to last week. So our kids suddenly were in the midst of spring break without very much to do. And kind of how we've been surviving is, and we'll go in later, I'll go into some ideas for the parents out there. But, we've just been surviving by creating some structure and, trying to get outside. In Southern California, our whole state is, California is basically not like lockdown, if you will, but, California is one of the big hit areas. And so we're just trying to get outside every day as we can and still practice that social distancing. So that's kind of where we're at. How about you, Karen?
So I am also the mother of two. My husband and I raised two boys. So one is 19, so I guess we could call him like grown up now, which is so weird. And our 15-year-old is here, and you may hear him. This has been several weeks now of just such improvement on the guitar. He's just noodling on the guitar. And the last couple of days, he's
Awesome.
been like, "Oh my God, listen to this thing I can do now that I couldn't do before." And he also started online classes today. Um, but our story is a little bit, it's funny. This 2020 has been a really, really interesting year. We've had some seismic shifts this year. I referenced before, our older son was in the hospital for 3 days. He needed a procedure that there were some complications that came up during that, and it was absolutely nuts. And I so the people there, with the We Turned Out Okay podcast, I also offer, I've got a private coaching group. So the Ninja Parenting Community is what that's called. And I work really closely with these parents. It's all online. So it's really cool because now we are so set up for this. We're doing a call, actually a live call each week of this crisis, because we all need that. Everybody needs that support.
Yeah.
And then I also, people can join the We Turned Out Okay email news group. And I send, for free, of course, I
Yeah.
send updates, basically newsletters every week. And during that time of Max's, my older son's hospitalization, I wrote a newsletter basically saying, here's what's positive about this situation. And here's where I'd really love some love and some hugs from you. And I got back so many letters of just
Oh, that's
wonderful
awesome.
sweetness and light. And so if you're listening and you were one of those people who wrote to me, just you have no idea what that meant. So that was one thing that happened. Another thing that's happened in 2020 for us is my husband was laid off from his job of 23 years. And
Wow.
that happened in late January. And I've been given permission to talk about it on the show, which I'm very glad of.
Yeah.
So we really looked at it as the golden handcuffs are off. It was a great run where he worked. We've got nothing but good things to say about his place of employment, but it held us back from, for example, we've always wanted to relocate to an area that is rural near a university. And while that it's currently on hold, but I would say that our attitude is a lot more wide open to just interesting things that we could do. Like there's no reason to stay in a location or a home that if we think we might want to try something different. And so this is a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but I'm originally from Canada, and my folks moved down to the United States. They moved to Massachusetts, where I still live, um, when I was 3. And I was actually visiting my folks in Colorado a few weeks ago. We'll get to that in a moment. Um, and I said to my dad, what was it like for you to sort of move countries? How did you tell people around you? Because we've experienced people around us saying, we don't want you to move. Like, you can't do this this is awful. And my dad basically said, well, once you've moved to another country with 2 small children, you can do anything, basically, his thought. And they've gone on to become world travelers. And also he said it really, everybody learns that just because you've moved doesn't mean that you're gone. And so I guess I'm thinking about it now because I feel like a lot of us are in this place of like, nothing is normal. Nothing is the same. We're all in this place of, I guess we're all testing our mettle right now. I've heard it said that, like, this is the challenge of our generation. And this is the thing that we will look back on, and we will, like, our kids are all going to say, remember that time when we got to watch as much TV as we wanted? Right. So anyway, just to return to these last few weeks for us. So we had, my husband was laid off. My son was in the hospital. And then I went to Colorado with my youngest. We were going to have a ski vacation out there. We've done this every year for several years. My parents live out there. It's awesome, good fun. Well, it turned out that we were stepping into a real coronavirus hotspot. And my son and I both got sick while we were out there. So
Oh,
we
wow.
were not tested. It's likely not coronavirus. So it was like, what we had was probably the flu. But at the time, what we knew was all the sort of institutions are changing around us. There's no more World Cup skiing. There's no more NHL. There's no more NBA. There's no more basketball of any kind. And then on our last, we were supposed to leave a few days after we did leave. We ended up changing our flights. But that last full day we were there was my first day back to skiing after being sick. My
Yeah.
son was going to ski the next day, and we got an email that said, guess what? Vail Resorts are closing all of their North American. And we were like, what is going on? I mean, this
Yes.
never happens, right?
Yes.
And so for my son and I, it was a real journey back home. I mean, the airports were, well, certainly Denver Airport, everybody was wonderful. But gosh, it was surreal. It was like we'd never seen. Security lines were really long. There's a tram that takes you from the main terminal to like your
Right.
gate terminal. And usually that's a source of fun and enjoyment. And this time there was only one tram running. And so you're sitting in basically a sea of humanity waiting for trains, and nobody's letting the train's doors close. And, you're not preserving that social distancing at all. And yet everyone was wonderful. I mean, people were amazing during that whole thing. And so that's really what I've been trying to remember is, while this has been going on, Fred Rogers talks about look to the helpers. You'll always find people who are helping. And I really felt that day. And since then I feel like Heather, I know you probably feel like this too. We're being helpers. I take so much comfort from being a helper, and it helped, like not just what we're doing right now, but with my family, with and I hope what we'll be able to get into today is helping kids be helpers, because I think that's going to be a huge way that we kind of get through this. So the short story, the end of that story is we are home. We're in the midst of 2 weeks of quarantine, because anybody who came from Summit County, Colorado now needs to be self-quarantined at home to make sure that if we have this, we don't pass it on. So far, so good. We're all well. But boy, it's a real change. So
For sure. I've experienced that too, even just at the grocery store, and everybody's feeling stressed out because there's limited food, but also, in every other aspect, we're trying to avoid people. And then here we are at the grocery store. But everybody was, when I've gone out, everybody has been kind. I haven't, I know that I've heard reports. I know that there are rude people out there who are, and maybe they're not rude people. Everybody's dealing with a lot of stress, right? And so, but for what I've experienced so far is just a lot of kindness amongst strangers. We're all in this together. It kind of reminds me of, it's definitely reminiscent of 9/11 in that, we do feel together as a community for sure.
Yeah. And I would say you're always going to hear stories of somebody who was awful at like my husband was, early on before we had left for Colorado. So early March, my husband went to the grocery store, and he said it was nuts. And he came back and was telling that there were, the cashier was telling him there had been 2 fights, like real fights in the grocery store. So those are, those people are out there. And again, as you say, I don't think they're bad people or mean people. They're stressed out people, and injecting kindness into the world and actively looking for it, I think is so important. And if I could just share 2 quick little anecdotes of things that have happened to us. Our library here has closed, like so many. And before they did, they called and they said, listen, if you've got books on the hold shelf, you can still pick them up. What we're going to do today and tomorrow is we're going to put your books in a bag. We're going to, you're going to go to the parking lot, call us from the parking lot. We're going to walk them out to a bench. We'll go back inside. Then you get to go get them.
That's awesome.
I spent some time on the phone with the librarian who also pulled some extra books for our 15-year-old, because nobody can go into the library. So each of us ended up with like 10 books from the library. So I've got some knitting books, I've got some novels, he's got all these great Dungeons and Dragons books. And I mean, just people being so incredible, going so above and beyond. And then the other story about that is I got an email while I was still in Colorado from a store that I absolutely love. Shout out to A Great Yarn on Cape Cod. It's a knitting and bookstore. And in this email, they said, if you're in self-quarantine, let us know and we will send you some goodies. And so I was like, as soon as I heard that we needed to be in self-quarantine, I was like, I am doing that. And I wrote to them on a Monday, and on Wednesday, I received sent priority mail. So they paid the big bucks for this. a skein of beautiful yarn and
Oh,
enough to
that's
make a shawl and
awesome.
a pattern for that. I mean, like it's made me feel so grateful to them. I want to shout about them anywhere I can. I am going to make a point of getting down there at least once a year. It's a little bit of a pilgrimage for us, but oh my gosh, a great yarn in Chatham, Massachusetts on the Cape. So
Oh, that's
cool.
so awesome. Yeah, no, I think that's totally true that lots of businesses and individuals are stepping up in this situation. And it's really cool to see that.
Yeah. Have you experienced anything, not anything necessarily like that, but what, can you give us one sort of kindness thing that you've noticed?
Yeah, I mean, so I am a part of something called Safe Families, which basically it's a nonprofit organization that's connected to churches where, from time to time, my family, we take in kids, at-risk kids. So, and it's, without getting into all the specifics, it's kind of like a foster care situation, except the parents haven't lost, rights with their child, right? There isn't abuse or neglect. It's more of like abuse, neglect prevention. So
Mm-hmm.
parents might be going through, let's say, a treatment program, or maybe they're temporarily homeless. So over the years, we've taken in kids from time to time. But yeah, I just did when I was at the grocery store, I was able to pick up a bunch of extra items. Like I even found some toilet paper, and then I was able, I know, right? And I was able to collaborate. My sister sent me some money, and other individuals. So just, getting all these extra resources together for that organization so that they can hand it out to, because predominantly who they're giving it to is all the single moms, right? Who are, let's say, former Safe Families recipients, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who, have had to lean on Safe Families here and there. So, organizations like that are going and, connecting with people and whatnot. So I guess just as a word of encouragement, I know we're all living in a little bit of fear right now. So it's hard. Actually, my husband and I were talking about this last night, because it's hard sometimes to know the balance. In the one sense, like, I want to keep my family safe, right? I don't want to expose myself. I don't want to expose my family. But on the flip side, being a part of, helping, I like what you said about kind of the focus on how can we be helpers. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, part of teaching our kids to be helpers is what we want our kids to be helpers. The way we can do that is model it. So, there's so many different levels and ways to do that. So trying to find the opportunity to be that helper in one way or another, as, it's a scary time. People are losing their jobs. People are really sick. People are in fear of what happens, if they have a health condition, and they're like, what if I get this sickness, what's going to
Yeah.
happen to my family?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, so I've heard this described as a double pandemic of COVID-19 and fear.
Yeah.
And I think that's so, so true. And so much of what I've had to work against is letting that fear kind of pull me, into a vortex, I guess. One morning when I was in Colorado, when things were really felt like they were at their worst, I got a text from my husband, and his text sound is ding ding, and he's also 2 hours behind.
Mhm.
There's Mountain Time, and then there's the Eastern Standard Time is 2 hours behind. So I'm
Yeah.
getting this just as I'm waking up. He's sending it, mid morning for him, and it didn't come across as ding ding. It came across as ding, and because sometimes it glitched a little bit. And
Yeah.
before I was awake, I was already crying, wondering what was going on. Like I was already sort of pulled into a what turned out to be an anxiety attack for me. And my
Yeah.
husband just wanted a recipe. Like he just he just wanted to hear, he wanted my chili recipe from a friend of ours. And the way that I pulled myself out of that was first of all to remember what I teach all the time. I think if you listening and watching are going to take one thing away from this, it would be this: we have to look at what is right in front of us, what is happening right now, instead of telescoping down the road. So my therapist will call that. I've been seeing a therapist for 5.5 years, almost 6 years, and we talk a lot about my capacity for catastrophizing. And so when you're doing that, right, you're not thinking about all the joyful things that are going to happen, next summer or whatever, you're thinking like, oh God, what does this mean? And so that was the first thing I had to do, is remember, you know what, I have to look at what is right in front of me right now. And then I did a breathing exercise that I've been doing again for years, but that helps me so much. It's called a 4-7-8 breath. It's where you breathe in for 4, you hold for 7, and you breathe out for 8. And it's actually, it
Okay.
sounds easy, but it's tough. It took me probably a month or so to ramp up to like 8 repetitions morning and night. And I've been doing that now since 2013. So uh,
Awesome.
very,
Awesome.
very, very helpful.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of resources out there if people are looking for, resources of how to deal with stress and anxiety. I don't know all the apps. Before all this started, actually, my husband and I subscribed to the Headspace app,
Yes.
which had, but I think that there's some free ones as well. But and the cool thing too is that for parents, they actually have a lot of these apps have assistance for kids as well. So if your kids are having a hard time sleeping in the midst of all this,
Mhm.
or if they're having anxiety, using some of the deep breathing and meditation and mindfulness exercises with kids and yourself can be really helpful. So I think that's a really good, resource, whether it's Headspace or other apps out there for meditation.
And that reminds me too, my husband has been, since he was laid off. I almost feel like the layoff was a bit of a preparation for the other things that we've seen in 2020. And when he was laid off, he went to his doctor, and his doctor basically said, he recommended, among other things, adopting a mindfulness practice. And
Yeah.
so my husband used Headspace for a while, really liked it. I feel like after 7 days, it's a
Hmm.
paid gig though. So what he found one called Mindfulness Coach, which is
Cool.
done through the Veterans Administration, and he's really, really liked it. He's gotten a lot out of it, and they do neat exercises. So one that he did recently was, um, you are to pull out a picture and look at a picture really intensively and deeply for 5 minutes, which, if you think about it, that's a long time to look at a picture, you know. The one that he chose was, he went to our wedding album and he found a picture of us with my parents on one side and his mom on the other, which I just thought was kind of neat. And so I'm writing some stuff down.
Cool.
Headspace is one thing I'm writing down. I'm writing down Mindfulness Coach from the VA. And then, was it Safe Families that you had
Yeah,
mentioned?
safe families. Yeah, so basically, they're all around the United States, and actually, as it is connected to Christian churches, but that doesn't mean people who volunteer there aren't necessarily Christian. All of them, and the families don't have to be as well. It's just connected to the church. But yeah, if families right now are going through a circumstance where they've lost their job, they're temporarily homeless, that could be a potential resource for
Yeah.
those families.
That's exactly why I want to link to it. And I just think it's really cool, the work that you are doing through them. I think that's
Yeah,
very, very neat.
definitely. Okay,
All
so
right, where should we go from
yeah,
here?
yeah. So how about this? I would love to give both of our sets of listeners just some ideas that I have about parenting through this challenging time. Just some
Cool.
kind of quick, I know there's moms and dads, but I'm just going to call it some mom hacks, if you will,
Yeah.
to surviving these challenging times. So the first thing I want to talk about, and I know that others, as I look online and social media and things like that, this is something that I've seen, but it's true, is setting up a schedule, right, with your kids.
Yes.
And it could be a schedule that's written down in words. It could be a schedule for younger kids of pictures, or it could just be more of a loose schedule. So I can tell you with my kids who are 6 and 9, we haven't actually written down a schedule, but they know the cadence of our days.
Yes.
So I can kind of give you what we're doing right now. Right now, when they wake up, they're having a little bit of, before we eat breakfast, they're having some free time to play, and then we eat breakfast. We're trying to create a sense of normalcy, so they, after breakfast, they're still getting dressed and brushing their teeth and doing all the things they would normally do, and then we're having a period of time of reading, and again, they're 6 and 9, so they're in school all day, but I think that that is one academic practice that we're trying to kind of focus on. I
Mhm.
just kind of to go off on a small tangent and then I'll come back. And I'd be curious to get your ideas on this as well. But when we're parenting and trying to figure out schooling right now in the midst of all of this, I think it can feel really overwhelming as parents to know where to focus our energy. But the reality is, in the midst of all this anxiety, and stress and whatnot, we shouldn't be expecting ourselves or our kids to be functioning at our full capacity. So
Mhm.
in the next few days, I'm going to be getting, word from our teachers of what we're supposed to be doing, school wise and academically. And what my plan is, of course, I'm going to integrate that into our day, but I'm not going to stress about it. And I don't want to say I'm going to do the bare minimum, but I'm going to kind of take it day by day. And there's no way that we can replace the academics that my kids were getting in school 2 weeks ago in our home, and I'm not going to try. So you know trying though to, since they do read and they do enjoy reading, that having them read for a while has so far been successful. And then I'm letting them have basically, so they're trying to do an hour of reading, which is a long time for kids, and then they're doing an hour of screen time. And then just a note on screen time before I move on. It's one of those times where okay, so normally in our house, Monday through Thursday, we've gone through seasons where we've had some screen time during the week, and we've gone through seasons where we haven't. We
Mhm.
were just more recently in a season where we weren't doing any non-academic screen time Monday through Thursday. And primarily just because it was becoming like the kids were too busy. And so it was just becoming stressful for them to try to get everything done so they could have their screen time.
Yep.
And so, but it's a shifting time. So I think right now my kids are getting 2 or even sometimes more than 2 hours of screen time in the midst of all of this, and that's not normal for us. But I think, and by the way, if parents who are listening to this right now, if you're like, oh, my child's getting like 4 hours of screen time, no, it's you as the parent. You make that decision. Don't feel, now is not the time to feel guilty. Okay, when your kids have reached their limit. They show you in their face, they show you in their behavior, right? So then you can put on the brakes. But overall, don't be feeling guilty about additional screen time. We're all in the midst of kind of that survival mode. And and also I'm being careful, like what type of screen time my kids have, because I know for my son, he likes to play video games, and we're not doing video games every day because I know that sometimes can be challenging for him, to get off of video games and whatnot. So I'm still being cognizant of the type of screen time my kids
Yeah.
are having. But I'm not worrying so much if they get additional screen time. Oh, well. uh, and then they're having some more free time, and then we're having lunch, right? And then one of the things that we've done, and one of the things I would encourage your listeners to incorporate if you can, is if you have loved ones who are either like, grandparents who are either retired or who are home who can't work, or if into other individuals, incorporate, FaceTime or some sort of video app where those individuals can come and provide some of that, let's say academic or at least interaction, but it could potentially be academic. So what we're doing, my mother-in-law already does actual tutoring with our kids twice a week via Zoom. Like that was what we were doing
That was already
previously.
established. Very cool.
So we've just increased that.
Yeah.
So now she's, once a day, she's getting on and doing some of that. It's reading tutoring. So she does Barton tutoring. I don't know if you've heard of Barton, but it's one evidence-based way. If your kids are at risk of a learning disability, Barton is a method that helps. It really focuses on like phonemic awareness and understanding of all the sounds, and also rules and grammar and things like that to help kids read. And so right now my kids are doing that every day. Um, and then, they're having a chore to help in the home of some sort during the day. And then they're getting their second, hour of screen time. And we're going from there. So for us, like I said, I think establishing a routine or a schedule, allowing your kids to participate in creating that schedule, kind of giving back some of the, here's the deal. their control, their power. They don't have a lot of it anyways, right? But especially now, they have such minimal control of their lives. So giving them some of the freedoms to make some of those decisions for their schedule will increase their buy-in, and you're less likely to get the pushback. So
Oh,
establishing that schedule is important.
so much of that resonates so
Yeah.
much. First of all, I love the idea of a schedule, but the word that you used was the cadence of our days. So, um, I think one of the resources that I found was in the Boston Globe this morning, or possibly yesterday morning. It's called Lessons from 1 Week, or from week one of the new normal, and I will
Yes.
link to it in the show notes. Um, and what they talk about is how it starts off. So you started the quarantine with color-coded Excel spreadsheets for distance learning and dreams of teaching your kids to bake bread. Now at week 2, the little scamps are on a steady diet of YouTube, and the closest you've come to bread baking is prowling for a pea pod delivery window at midnight. And like, so much of that would not have even made sense in the English language like 2 weeks ago.
I know. Our kids have learned so many words that we wish like
Yes.
we
Yeah,
haven't had to teach them.
so nutty. And then the next line is, turns out pandemics sap the will of even the most conscientious parent. And I actually have in my notes that I sort of feel like this is an opportunity for us to reconnect with what's most important, because we are so used to running our lives on Excel spreadsheets that are color coded, and so kids' brains just developmentally, it's funny, Heather, you were talking at the beginning about how you have a sort of little known acronym attached to your name, and so do I. So my undergrad degree is in human development and family relations, which is HDFR, was that's the sort of major I graduated.
Yeah.
And in that, human development. So we learned about the spectrum of development from pre-birth all the way through, on up through adolescence, aging, death, all that kind of stuff. Death, dying, and bereavement was one of the classes I took, actually. And along with like prenatal and other cool things like that. But in the grand scheme of things, the Excel sheets, the worksheets, the things like that, they are not the most important things right now. And I think that we can feel like, okay, we've got this huge plan, and it involves every hour we're going to change to do something else, or every 15 minutes they're going to be on this little task and on that little task. And of course, we're also trying to coordinate our working lives because everybody is at home. And kids, there will come a point, I suspect, with most kids where they're going to be like, I just can't do this. And so you'll get tears, or you'll get stomach aches, or you'll get thrown food, or you'll get sibling fights, or
Yeah.
when we try to sort of stick with what to kids is a difficult line, that is sort of worse for everybody. So I loved what you were saying about they're going to get their assignments. So it's interesting because I don't know how this is working for elementary age kids. My hope is that there's some check-in time, like real face time with the teacher, each day or each weekday. And that it's less about like, sit down now while we go over this math concept or this something or other, because that's not what's important right now. What's important
No.
is getting outside and connecting with people in a visual sense, even if they don't live with us, if we can't see them in real life. So the idea of connecting with grandparents or other loved ones, at making that a part of the day, I think that's so incredibly cool.
Yeah.
And so it's my sort of you had asked me to kind of talk a little bit about like what's homeschooling like, because
Yeah.
and viewers may not know this, but I homeschooled my sons from the time that they were 7, but the older one was 7 and the younger one was 3. And so the older one has gone off into college now, and the younger one is he's in a school that it's basically, if you could homeschool but also go to school. Um, it's self-directed learning is what it's called, and it's all non-compliant, so kids only go to classes that they want to go to. One of the things that I like best about this particular model is there's a lot of mentorship involved. So my son has an advisor meeting every week with one of the staff, and they don't say things like, so, we can see from your math test last week that you need to build up your strength in division, right? What they say is, what are you interested in learning about? Like, what turns your crank? What do you want to see and do and experience? And they sort of build on that. And I would say that this is such a good opportunity for everybody listening and watching to have that chance with your own child to arrange the schedule and the circumstances and the things that they're exposed to make it really interesting for them. And what I've actually done is on my website, this will be up tomorrow in real time for Ninja Parenting community members. It's live right now in the Ninja Parenting community, but for everybody else, I'm doing a podcast tomorrow, and I've got this whole list of resources called 28 stuck-at-home quarantine kid activities organized by amount of adult input. So
Oh, that's cool. I'll link to that in my show notes as well. That's amazing.
Excellent. So it's going to be at weturnedoutokay.com/223, I believe. Is the link. But I'll make sure and I'll send that to you, Heather. And so when I talked to the people in the Ninja Parenting community last week, I heard tales of grandparents who lived with the family, but who had different discipline styles. And so the parent was very concerned that like, if I'm not disciplining my child in this way, is it damaging or dangerous to the child? So that was one huge question. Another one was, I've got a little kid in the living room, and I've got this serious job that is taking place right now in my bedroom. I can't have the kind of input that I would want to have. I don't know how to manage this. So I think a schedule is one thing that's so super important. But then, that's the reason I did these. They asked for minimum adult input activities, moderate adult input activities, things we could do together. So they're all organized by that. And I think you could make an argument that most, if not everything on this list, which actually I say 28, it's actually more like 32 at this point, are all educational things, but they're not traditional education. So I think I guess what we're asking here is that everybody kind of think outside the box in terms of what's most important right now. Keeping the anxiety down, getting outside, and doing some activities that are fun, but that in the fun are also educational. So does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I think part of the purpose of continuing education right now, again, is just so that, the kids were expecting to finish the school year. Now it's like, are they going back? Probably not. I'm not sure. But I think just, again, kind of keeping with a routine, but again, pushing it out of our minds that it's going to replace what they were doing at school. That's not probably likely going to happen for most people. And every day is going to be different. Here's the deal. Right now, if you are working and you have an important series of meetings, you might just have to be like, Johnny, you can watch YouTube, or maybe not YouTube. Maybe not YouTube, yeah. But like, yeah, but
definitely not YouTube.
Yeah. I say YouTube. My kids don't have access to YouTube. I just said YouTube, but you can watch, a X, Y, or Z program for the next however long, because I have a meeting I need to go to. But then also, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking too, a lot of jobs are going to be and are having to be more flexible too. Mm-hmm. So if there's a 2-parent situation, it's still in our country, even though moms are working, pretty much just as much as dads are working, a lot of the responsibility for kids and education still falls on the mom. Mm-hmm. But, so relying on your spouse or your significant other to assist and having that communication and saying like, I can't do this by myself, their work is going to have to be more understanding. And I think for the most part, people's works are. Actually, it's funny this morning. So my husband had a call, so he went into his office, but I mean, his office is downstairs and we were eating breakfast. And meanwhile, my son had a meltdown that he had to feed the dogs. He does that twice a day. And our dog started barking and all of that. And like normally he would be super stressed out about a phone call where the kids like were making that much ruckus. And I mean, he said something afterwards, but it wasn't, and he was able to realize, and I think that the person on the other end was able to realize that we're all just making us work.
This is what's happening now.
Yes. Yeah. I do have another resource I want to tell your listeners about. So another thing that I would recommend is trying to set up some sort of, and it doesn't have to be elaborate, but I'm all about like reward systems. And I think, and I've seen lots of examples of parents doing this successfully right now. And, if you've been thinking about doing this in the past, now is a good time probably to try. It doesn't have to be elaborate, but setting up ways, whether it's they can earn some of that screen time or earn different prizes, but unfortunately, as parents, when we get stressed out, we oftentimes start to rely on discipline, like you did this, you're on timeout, and so having a reward system actually helps us parent better and it motivates our kids to, comply with what we need them to do. So, I have a resource. So if everybody goes to prismbehavior.com, PRISM behavior.com/free guide, they can download a PDF which walks them through how to implement a reward system with kids of different ages. So with really young kids, it might just be first do this, then you can have this. It's just kind of like the order of events.
Yep.
Okay. With kids who are a little older, you can do some sort of star system where, earn 4 stars, then watch this program, or, earn 4 stars and then have this treat. And then with older kids, what I've been doing with my kids for a while now is a system with like a piggy bank and quarters where for certain behaviors, they can earn quarters. And then at the end of a period of time, they can spend some of that money, save some of that money, and give some of that money so that I can, start to teach them that financial responsibility as well. So again, it's not to put, I don't want parents who are listening to be like, oh, another thing I have to do. But honestly, this will help you. So what I see is that a lot of times parents are spending about 80% of their effort on disciplining and really only then able to focus 20% of their effort on kind of that proactive approach to prevent the problem behavior. But if you try to shift and, make it your goal to spend 80% on the proactive side, then you're only going to have to spend 20% on the discipline side. It's not to say that you don't, put your kids on timeouts when they need it. And, those things aren't in place because you probably still need to do those things, but you can change the whole dynamic of your home to be a lot more positive, and you won't need to discipline as much, and everybody will be a lot happier if we can kind of shift to that proactive type of parenting, if you will.
It's so interesting. So I typically, I think in a lot of life, I would tend to sort of shy away a little bit from reward systems. But I think what you say is so important to remember. So I, as a person who, I don't do a lot with reward systems, like formal reward systems.
Yeah.
I think what I'm going to say, I would say with the caveat of making sure that, because if we overuse those kinds of systems, we can take something that was once intrinsic and fun for a child and make it extrinsic and not as motivating internally.
Yeah. So can I talk about that caveat? So
I would love that.
interesting. Yeah. So there's interesting research to back up what you're saying. So here's the deal. We want to reward behaviors that are happening at a low frequency to begin with. So let me kind of put that into layman's terms. If your child is already motivated to read, let's say, don't reward your child for reading, because if you reward your child for doing something that they already do, okay, then it's going, they already like to do it. So if you try to take that reward away, then they're going to read less often and they're going to find less joy in reading than they did previously. Okay. There's research to support that. But here's the deal. So, and actually I had there's a guy named Dr. Dan Peters. He has the Parent Footprint podcast, and he was telling, he put it like this, which I thought was really interesting. most of us have used reward systems, before. So a lot of parents use it for potty training. Okay.
That's what we use it
But
for.
yeah, but if people are like, oh, well, then, if I stop using it, what's going to happen? But I mean, your 10-year-old is not currently needing candy to go to the bathroom, so what the evidence shows, what the research shows, is that if you take a behavior and you're trying to teach a skill and you reward that behavior, you're going to see a faster pace of learning. And then you can fade that back and it'll be okay. So, but like, if you take things that your kids are not likely to do and you reward them, then as the rate of behavior increases, then you can pull back on the reward and reward something else. And that will be helpful and it won't be problematic.
I love
Versus, yeah, if you take something your kids are already like, let's not reward them for doing things that they like to do. We can give them a lot of praise and affirmation. There's evidence to suggest, for example, that, unfortunately, as parents, constantly, if we're distracted, especially, we're reprimanding, like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. But there's a lot of, if you just start to find the little things in the day that your child is doing right, so we call it the good behavior game,
Yep.
and praise them for that, you'll see an increase in the positive behaviors as well. So praise and affirmation is great. It works, but maybe for those hard things that your kids are struggling with. So, in our home, like my son feeding the dogs, that's always hard. So if I can reward him for those things, it's going to be helpful, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes such good sense, and I'm really really glad to have that clarification. I think this, like so much else in life, and this is a time where we're really seeing these like messy middles right now. Um, we can't ever say, like, I would never say, I'm not a huge proponent, for example, of timeout, but because I look at it, to me, standard timeout is a little bit more of a negative discipline, whereas what I
Yeah.
positive discipline, right? But
Hmm.
I'm not going to stop someone from using a timeout if it's effective and they think that, that they think it's a really good way to work with their child. We did use, I'll never forget when we started using a reward system for potty training. I do have permission to share this story. So my son was 4. He was not pooping on the potty. He was peeing. That was fine. But number 2 was a huge problem. And I was lying in bed one morning and I heard my husband say, if you go poops on the potty, I will give you a donut. And my son was like, "Oh, a donut?" And and I wanted to bring it up because it gets into this idea of like, how do you back off from one donut for one poop, right? And so for the first couple of times, that's literally what we did. He got a donut when he went poops on the potty. Very, very exciting. And then we implemented a really rudimentary sticker system where I had a piece of paper up next to where he could reach it on the potty. And if he was able to go poops on the potty, I think we started with 5 times. He would get a sticker for each time, and then he would get a donut. So like, and then eventually he got to the point where he didn't need the donut anymore, but he still loved this. Just putting that sticker up there was such a big
That's a
deal.
perfect example of fading effectively. Like, and I think that's a really good point. And the good thing with going to thinking about that, what starts to happen once your child gains the skill is they come in contact with the kind of intrinsic reward, right? So, I mean, there's a relief component
Yeah.
to, using the restroom appropriately and not getting dirty and things like that. And so once the kids start to experience that, then they don't need the donut. But I do tell parents, to try to stay away from what I would call like the Disneyland prize, So obviously nobody's going to Disneyland right now or Disney World or places like that because they're closed.
Mhm.
But I've seen parents like try to promise the world, and the reality is it's better to give small little rewards that you can give over consistently. So whether it's small donuts or candy or TV shows, things like that, if you give those things, then you can continue to do those things without being very stressed out about it. But if you give your kid Disneyland, good luck next time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
How are you going to repeat that? Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think our time is getting a little bit
Yeah.
short.
Yeah.
There's a Facebook question that I wanted to ask you
Awesome.
before we finish up. But before we get to that, one thing I just wanted to say, I feel like I've been summing this all up in my mind a little bit of we're doing whatever works right now. Excessive screen time is not ideal, but this is the sort of situation where, next year in the spring, we will all look back on this and our kids will be saying, remember when we got to have so much screen time? And you can
Yeah.
be like, yeah, I do remember that, because tragedy plus time equals comedy. And we can sort of be amused a little bit hence. But I think if you are listening or watching and you are confused about how much of your child's school assignments should I be making them do, and how much screen time should they have, and how am I going to cope? I think so. Heather's idea of coming up with a schedule that is both flexible but also just reflective of the cadence of your days, I think that's really, really important. And you can incorporate these other things. You can incorporate some screen time. You can incorporate some educational time. You can incorporate some outside time and some family time. What I want you to think of is, I am making this my prime directive. And I think if you're listening and watching, you might want to consider making it yours too, which is this: how, when this is all over, do we want our kids to have felt about this time with us? This, like, it's such a strange time, and they will remember it at, almost in a model sense, right? Because we're modeling behavior for them, but they'll remember it in some way or other. And if we're lucky, they'll remember it as that time when we never had to get out of our pajamas if we didn't, if that whatever works for your family. My mother used to call our homeschooling experiences perpetual Saturday morning, because we did all of our homeschooling in pajamas. And so if that works,
Yes,
that's
for
so
sure,
great.
for sure. Nobody should feel, if they heard what I said earlier and they're like, oh, I let my kids stay in their pajamas, it's fine.
Whatever works, right?
You do you. No mom guilt.
Yeah.
No mom guilt. No dad guilt.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's funny, because here's my line. When we were homeschooling, and even now, that I've been working at home, or, doing my podcasting and coaching from home for so long, my line is, what kind of bra am I wearing? Like, if I'm wearing a sleeping bra, that means it's rest time. If I'm wearing like a lift and separate sort of bra, that's where I'm on. And so, like, for me, that's the line. Everything else can be pajamas. I'm perfectly happy with that. But somewhere for everybody, there's some line. And if that line is pajamas, awesome. Maybe if it's clean pajamas, not the
Yes.
same day every pajama.
Yes.
But just so trying to give your kids that sense of, this is an adventure. This is exciting. This is new. We're learning together. We're enjoying our time as much as possible. It's not going to be like that every moment. It can't all be sunshine and rainbows and kittens. But hopefully, when you look back, if you've given that to your kids, then you will also have those feelings, and
Definitely.
that way.
Definitely. And I think one of the things that we've been trying to practice is that at the dinner table, so, we have our normal routine of eating together. We pray before we eat, and then we eat. And then during that, we usually talk about our day. But one of the things we've been practicing in our home is like asking those open-ended questions about, how the kids are feeling. How do you feel? What do you think about this? Because, and just kind of, you don't want to put ideas into their head like, do you feel scared?
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, like, asking those questions on a consistent basis is really helpful. And it kind of, for me, put me at ease a little bit. Because, like, for example, last night I was asking the kids how they were feeling. And by the way, quick caveat, or quick little sidebar. Last night, what we did was we fed the kids, put them to bed, and then my husband and I had a date night at home. And I'm a big proponent of consistent date nights. So we got to have our special time together, even in the midst of chaos. But while I was feeding, yeah, but while I was feeding the kids, I was like, how are you feeling? And they were both like, we're okay. We're okay. And I think they're okay because, I'm okay.
Yeah.
And, and I'm still nervous and anxious, to a certain degree. I love that you shared that, you had an anxiety attack in all of this, because honestly, those of us who struggle some with like that anxiety piece, like especially it's heightened right now, right? But as I've been practicing kind of in some of the self-care and some of the things that we've been talking about today, I was able to see that my kids are looking to me and my husband, and we're doing all the things that we need to do, and my kids are feeling safe and taken care of. And for sure, they're a little bored, but they're okay. We're okay, Mom. We're okay.
Yeah.
So for me, having that conversation is super helpful. But then if your kids are experiencing anxiety, actually, I have a podcast episode that just aired today, where I'm speaking to a colleague of mine about anxiety, and we decided to break it up into 2 parts. So kind of the first part that just released today on March 23 is kind of like what anxiety looks like in kids, like how can you identify what anxiety is,
Mm,
right? And then next week will be the what can you do about it? And so if your kids are experiencing anxiety, you can do some of those mindfulness things that we've talked about, but also a lot of therapists and whatnot are doing some of that telehealth, right? So, you can, you don't have to wait till all this is over to seek out counseling for your child if they are experiencing anxiety.
yeah. Yeah. That's such a good and important point. God, I wish that we didn't have to wrap up, but I
I know, I know. I think it's time.
yeah. Okay. So Nora in the We Turned Out Okay Facebook group has asked, where am I here? There I am. Okay. So first of all, hi Nora. Here's
Hi,
your question.
Nora.
How to help? She's asking, how do we help kids feel connected when other things like working from home are also going on? And I think she means connected with us. um, how can we help them continue to sort of have that connection even if we are
Yeah.
separate from them for some of the day?
Yeah, so I think it's so this is the feedback and advice that I would give. It's trying to create those touch points during the day and scheduling them in. One of the things that we've done is we actually had the kids write down like a list of like not just the kids, all of us wrote down 3 things to do as a family after dinner, and we put them into a bowl. And then the idea is we draw one out at that after dinner, and we do it together, whether we have a foosball table, so it's like playing foosball or whatever. So we've built that into our routine, and then we've also built into our routine trying to go outside. So you know just feeling for sure that your kids are going to have to do some independent activities, and I love the list that you've created, Karen. That will help. But just conscientiously like scheduling in those touch points, I think will be helpful. And then it's not just being connected to us, I think it's about being connected to each other. So one of the things that we've done is allow our kids to go on video chat with each other, supervised, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I will admit the first thing that my daughter did was she thought it was really funny to show her friend the toilet. So she like ran the iPad into the bathroom. And at first I was like, she closed the door. I was like, what are you doing with the camera? I had like a moment of panic of like, I hope she's not showing her going to the bathroom or something awful. No, she wasn't. She's like, I just showed her the toilet. But she's 6, so like, right. I was like, let's have video, let's have FaceTime in like the family room, okay, Addie?
Mm-hmm.
But allowing them unique ways to connect with each other, I think, is important too. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
do.
that's super good. So I the fourth part of that list that you just referenced um is called stuff to do together. So I feel like these are things that might be really fun to put in that bowl. So dance party is one that I wrote down. There's a game called blank cards that I just don't have time to explain. Maybe what I'll do is try to go live or do something where I explain blank cards, because it's definitely for older kids. It's played like Pokemon, but I don't have time to explain here. Pillow fighting and horseplay. With appropriate boundaries, I think is so important. Dr. Laura Markham, who has a website called ahaparenting.com, she's just an incredible force for like helping kids through trauma. She talked on my show about how horseplay is really important for helping kids through the fears and work through those fears and worries that they have. Because when it's something thrilling but in play, that's a little scary but a little bit like what's going to happen next kind of a thing, but that they have control over. So if it's tickle fighting, they can always say no, stop, and everybody always stops, right? It's just super helpful for them as they're going through that. Pillow fighting and horseplay, super fun, super silly. Wheelbarrows and crab walking. So wheelbarrows are when you grab your child's ankles and they push themselves up off the floor and walk hand over hand. So they're being a wheelbarrow. Crab walking, you're on all fours with your tummy up towards the ceiling, trying to walk around. Playing with cornstarch and water, which is like you just mix cornstarch and water, and oh my God, it's just so much fun. And the last one that I have here is building a cardboard castle that is kid sized. So like
Yes.
trying to take, if you've got big boxes, stacking them or finding some way maybe even as a family to do that. So there's some ideas there. I love the idea of touch points during the day. I think that's a really, really wonderful thing. So
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I'm so glad that we could collaborate today. And, the circumstances are a little bit crazy, but I think this too shall pass. And I'm so glad that parents can find these resources, and that professionals like us can collaborate in challenging times like this.
yeah, I appreciate it so much that you opened this. So this morning, I basically emailed Heather about 20 minutes before we went live, and I said, "Hey, do you want to do this video? And do you want to do this
Yeah.
way?" And Heather was totally on board for it. So I
I
really.
was like, okay, I'll shower.
So you can find Heather Maguire, Dr. Heather Maguire, at prismbehavior.com, PRISM behavior.com. And also, I just wanted to highlight again, prismbehavior.com/free guide, where you can
Yeah.
find that resource that Heather was talking about before.
Yeah. Karen, why don't you list your website for my viewers too?
Okay, so my everything I do is located at WeTurnedOutOK.com. Now, you can find that by going to either okay.com or okay.com, but I have really put myself in a little bit of a bind, because if you want to go, for example, to WeTurnedOutOK.com/255, which is the Dr. Laura Markham interview, it can only be spelled one way, and that is OKAY. And then the last resource that I wanted to kind of reference here for everybody is I talked a little bit about this newsletter that I offer. And what I try to do is several times a week, I try to check in with parents and give you tools for getting through whatever's happening in your life. And right now this is so overarching, but this will pass, as Heather, you just said. But we're still going to keep going with that. So lots of tools and resources, lots of ninja tactics, lots of good stuff for parents. And that you can sign up for that by going to WeTurnedOutOK.com/weekly, WEEKLY. And that also is OKAY. Forever and ever, I'll be saying that. I always end my show by saying a huge thank you to our producer, the 22-time winner of the Husband of the Year Award, Benjamin Culp. He is the voice that you hear at the end of this show. He has been instrumental in keeping me happy and sane during this ordeal. In fact, when we got off the airplane, when my son and I got off the airplane, after we had stripped and showered and done all our laundry and all that kind of stuff, the first thing we did was just give each other a hug that lasted for like 5 minutes. So I'm super, super grateful to you, Ben, if you are listening. And Heather, I want to say thank you so much to you for coming on my show, and what a pleasure it's been to be on your show as well.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. And we will see you next time.
See you next time.